Well, I had a friend who was an artist, and he came by after work one day and showed me his new Thunderbird. We got to talking, and he said, you've expressed an interest in indigenous American music, and he said, I think I found something that you'll be interested in. So he took me for a ride in his new car, and we went down Ponce de Leon to the Blue Lantern, and we went into the back where it was all dark. And it was sort of like a lover's lane back there, and the only person around who was walking around was Willie, and he was sort of a strolling troubadour, and he was working for tips in the back parking lot of the Blue Lantern. Well, we heard him play. He would move from car to car. He'd play a song or two, and he'd move on. And he came by the car, and I introduced myself to him. And he played a couple of songs and he went on. And I was impressed by his style of playing, so I came back when I could over the next several weeks until one night I asked him if he would make a tape for me, and he said no, he wasn't interested in doing any recording. He'd done recording and it always come to grief. And he told me about experiences he had in the 20s and 30s, and he was disillusioned by the failure of the record companies that he had recorded for to provide for him in his old age, and he was just very embittered about that. And one night we came back, we were listening to him, and he was pretty drunk that night, and I hung around. And he collapsed and fell over. So I put him in the back of the car. I had a Ford station wagon at the time, and some of the people inside told us where they thought he lived. At that time the sections of the city were divided up into different sections that we knew about, but the blacks had their own names. They called it like 4th Ward and Mechanicsville, and guy would tell you he lived in Mechanicsville. You didn't know where Mechanicsville was. But he lived, if memory serves me, under a place called, of all things, the Dixie Dance Hall. And I think it was late on a Saturday night. We took him back there, and after some commotion in the street over us unloading a body out of the back of a station wagon in the middle of the night, the woman that he stayed with underneath this Dixie Dance Hall in a cellar along the side, it was built on sort of a hill, she came out and testified, to them that he was okay, and we carried him down and we left him there. Well, he woke up and I put some money in his pocket, He woke up the next morning and he found that he had not only the money that his tips, but extra money. And this startled him because he had never passed out before in his life that he hadn't been robbed. Now here he woke up at home. He still had his guitar. He still had his money, and he had more money than he started out with, and more than the tips that he'd made. And he had to find. Then he went on a quest to find me. So I got a call one day from my mother, who was at that time running my 13th Street store. On the corner of 13th and Peachtree, that this gentleman was up there to see me. And you got to understand, this was before desegregation. And that this black man was up there waiting for me with a guitar over his shoulder. And he had walked all the way up there from where he lived, maybe 6 or 7, 8 miles. For a blind person to walk that far to thank me for taking him home. Well, we became more friendly after that, and in the evening sometimes when he wasn't at the Blue Lantern, or sometimes during the week, he would come by and he would play. And then one night we were all sitting around. He said, he says, if you want to, he says, you can turn on the machine and we'll see how it sounds, but you got to play it for me afterwards. But I don't want this ever published while I'm alive, because if I did get any money from it, I would just drink myself to death. And I turned the machine on. It was, it was right behind him. It was in the back of the 13th Street store. And I was there, and a couple of my, close friends were there, and some other people drifted in. And he just played, and he had a bottle, and he drank, and when the tape was over, he listened to it, and we took him home. That was the last that I ever saw him.
Part of the tape was later released under the title Last Session, and indeed it was.